Our pork shoulder is in a heavy Dutch oven with 2 carrots, 2 ribs of celery, an entire head of whole garlic cloves, about a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of fresh ground black pepper, and then we have a combination of about a teaspoon of rosemary and then 2 teaspoons each of thyme and sage. Our liquid is 1 cup of red wine and 2 cups of stock. All of this is together in the pot, and you can see that the meat is coming up out of the liquid, which makes this a braising technique rather than a stew. So, we're going to put our lid down, which fits perfectly over it. We have our oven preheated to 350 degrees. This is going in right now. And in 3.5 hours, it's going to be like butter.
Now this is the even easier method. You just take your pork shoulder, drop it in your pan, toss over your mirepoix, don't forget your herbs and your salt, and then pour over your cooking liquid.
Put the lid on. We're not bringing it to a boil. We're not doing anything fussy with it. It's just in there all together. We put it in a preheated 350 degree oven, shut the door, and in 3.5 hours it will be delicious. Now, many of you purists out there are going to get on my case about this and say, hey, what about all the flavor you get from searing it beforehand, all that caramelization? Well, yes, all of that is very important and wonderful and delicious, and it will be wonderful that way, but this is going to be yummy too. And I defy you to tell the difference between the two. Now, let me show you how to make some very simple mashed yams. I've got about 3 pounds of yams, sweet potatoes, whatever you want to call them. People use the terms interchangeably, and I'm not going to get in anyone's case about it. I use a simple vegetable peeler for these, and I like to just be sure that I get all that skin off, because unlike a baking potato, the skin of a yam, I think, is just a bit too tough to, well, for most people to enjoy eating. So you notice we've got this nice, beautiful orange color. And it's a good idea, particularly if you're not going to be working right in front of your sink, if you have a disposal, to have a big bowl. I don't know if you remember the last time when we roasted our duck and I told you about having a big bowl. Big bowls are good for vegetables too, because we get all this little bit of peel and garbage and stuff, and you don't want to have to be tied to your disposal or sink or garbage can while you're working. So this is a nice way to have a portable, is there a nicer word than trash or garbage? Cooking residue that you can have that's a little more portable and a bit more sightly. I've got 1 peeled sweet potato, which is a nice, beautiful color. Now, be careful when you cut anything that's round, because it's going to want to try to wobble and get away from you. And again, that is a dangerous way, a very easy way to slice your fingers off, and no one wants that. So I've found what I feel is the flattest side of this sweet potato, and I'm going to have that be down, flat, so I think it's the most stable. And we're going to be cutting this into about 1 to 1.5 inch cubes. It doesn't have to be exact, but I like to have the pieces be small so that the cooking time, when we're simmering it in our salted water, is a little shorter. I think you get better flavor when the cooking time is shorter. So here we go. We're going to cut it into pieces. 2 long halves. I think this tends to work very well for these guys. And then we're going to cut each long half in half again. And notice that I've got the tip of the knife firmly placed on my chopping block. This is a very safe way to cut. You don't have your fingers underneath anything, and you can even use the edge of your hand to help stabilize the knife. You bring it down like a lever through your vegetable. Now, got these cut in half and half again, and then we're going to cut down them so that we have our little cubes. And you don't have to worry about anything wobbling or getting away from you. Just finished chopping up my last piece of sweet potato. And we're going to finish adding them to our cold, salted, that was a lot of salt, but that's a good thing. You actually want your water to taste kind of salty. At least that's my advice. Cold, salted water, enough to cover the sweet potatoes. We're going to turn the heat on high, and we're going to bring them to a boil. Once they come to a boil, we can reduce the heat a little bit and let them simmer for about 12 to 15 minutes until they're fork tender. And then I'll show you how to mash them up with brown sugar, butter, heavy cream, and salt. Our sweet potatoes have been simmering for about 8 minutes, and I just checked them, and they're actually tender to my fork. So it was a good thing that I checked them. They're done a little sooner than I was planning, which is always a nice thing, especially if you're paying attention. Ha-ha! So, turning the heat off, hot water. Be careful. If you've got other people in the kitchen, particularly children, make sure they get out of the way. Because if you spill this on somebody, they're going to be unhappy. So I'm going to put them in my nice big bowl. If you have an upright mixer, which is a nice piece of equipment, they make life very convenient. You can put this into it with a paddle attachment and beat them that way and add your ingredients. However, I'm going to show you how to do this by hand with a pastry cutter. This is usually used to incorporate cold butter into flour if you're making some kind of dough. If you're making scones, if you're making pie crust, this is what you'd use. I like to use it as a potato masher. So it's got a nice grip to it, and you can just drive it down into your potatoes. Be a little careful because the potatoes are hot, and they're going to work their way up toward your knuckles, which could be a little startling. And I like it if these come out just a little bit chunky. It gives it a little more of a pleasant mouth feel if you've got a little something to chew on. So there, that's nice and mashed, I think. And what we're going to be adding today, half a cup of heavy cream, 1/4 of a cup of packed, this is a light brown sugar which works very well, 1/4 cup, plop. And I like to melt my butter a little bit first. This is half a stick of unsalted butter. And I'm going to put it in the microwave for about 35 seconds while I continue to mash this, and then I'll pour the butter in.